Hey everyone, Brian Fouts here.
And Jake Fouts.
And once again, we're here with Kevin Day. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And we're in the security section of EVG right now, and the topic today is going to be about pre-marriage divorce planning. That is something that whenever you're going to be getting married, that you should be thinking about, as it has to happen before you get married, not after.
Right.
It has to be done ahead of time. But it's something that a lot of people don't think about. I know when I was getting married, it wasn't something that I was thinking about. And it's but everybody's going to get married, and the divorce rate today is, what is
55%.
55%. So of those 55%, how many do you think actually have planning ahead of time?
Probably less than 1%.
Yeah. So as far as security goes, and especially when you're building wealth, like what we're talking about in EVG, this is a topic that may not be popular, but is something that is very important. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Usually when people do planning prior to a marriage, they've already been through a divorce or two, and they become sensitized to it in a negative way. Or parents are really say, hey, you're going to get disinherited if you don't set up a prenup before you get married. And there's also postnuptials that are powerful as well. So a prenup or a postnup, in general, we're not marital attorneys in that we don't prosecute divorces or alimony cases or anything like that. But under the realm of lawsuit protection and asset protection, we do these two little weird things, like the buy-sell agreement is tantamount to asset protection and preservation of wealth, and also premarital agreements. And Americans particularly seem to be very romantic, and it's very difficult, even if they know the wisdom of doing a premarital agreement. They don't want to do it, broach that subject prior to this wonderful romantic venture. And we have an answer for you, gals and guys as well. But let's just talk about a prenup. Prenup is prearranging usually that sole and separate property or property that you already have prior to marriage retains that status. So it's clearly identifying people that already have some kind of an estate, that they're saying, no matter what, this house is mine, that house is yours, your house is nicer, so let's make arrangements, that I can stay in the house for this, that, and the other reason, but we're going to retain those and the wealth that might be get out of the sole and separate property. Then the next step is your earned income sole and separate, or is it going to be co-owned? And people have all different kinds of arguments and agreements. So that has to be hammered out on what their vision is. And some people, it's just what I came to the marriage with. I want to make sure no matter what, I'm not going backwards and losing anything. And it's all shared going forward. And others have completely separate estates that they file taxes separately and have different households. And when they do community stuff, they have so they have his and hers and then co-owned, and they say, okay, mutual expenses go into this account, and we do the mutual expenses, and hey, do you want to enter in, I'm going to buy this real property, do you want to go in with me 50-50? And they'll hold that on each side of their estates. So we have every gamut in that. A little bit of an issue is anybody that's gone through a divorce or has had a friend that has gone through a divorce some really peculiar things happened in family court. Why did that happen? Or they had a prenup, how come it wasn't recognized? And it's because family court is a court of equity. It's not a court of law. In England, there's still two different buildings, different judges. We put them all in one building, and if the city isn't big enough, the same judge is hearing a law case that's hearing an equity case. A contract is a thing of law. You can write a contract, and there's been stuff in the paper where an actress on a napkin said, yes, I will do that movie for X dollars, and said, no, that's not a real contract. And the judge said, yeah, that's a real contract. If I said I'll sell you my Jaguar for 2 cents, you could enforce that. So What happens in family court, you're submitting a contract, a thing of law, in a court of equity. Court of equity means the judge is the law. The judge gets to decide what's fair. And that's why, if it's acrimonious, the judge will always say, great, give me a copy of the premarital, and why do you, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, why do you think you should get more? And they will evaluate it. So 1 out of 5 aren't recognized. Which brings us back to asset protection trusts. A change of ownership is so principal in our legal system that if, and I've got just as many women doing these structures as men, by the way. So I have a client say, I'm going to put my business for me as a beneficiary and my spouse, should I have one, that's making me happy at the end of my day. That's a legal term. So if you get married, divorced, married, divorced, whoever's making you happy at the end of the day may be a beneficiary, however it's prescribed in there. You have a trustee. I'm just going to use exaggerated example. So we have a factory that's worth $5 million. And she gets $200,000 a year salary. She can do a lot more with it, but she's parlaying this into other businesses. She puts that business into the irrevocable trust prior to marriage. Again, no fraudulent conveyance, covered in the other modules. Her husband wants a divorce, and he says, I want my $2.5 million. I want half of that factory. She can say, I didn't own it when we got married. I have a $200,000 a year salary that the court might make me pay alimony on, but you can't take the factory. And we've done this, and it's been looked at. It's very clear. Even family court, equity court, won't mess with a change of ownership because it's so principal to our legal system. And you don't have to ask anybody to do anything. You can just do it, and you don't have to deal with the emotional issues of asking somebody to do a prenup, prior to marriage. It's not that I'm advocating, your lifestyle is your lifestyle, and what you need for disclosure is your thing for disclosure. But if that's too sensitive of a prospect, this is a way to do it. We have many people that do both. They do belt and suspenders. I want this, and I want a prenup and all kinds of things, acknowledging that I set up an irrevocable trust, 6 months ago, and these are my sole and separate property, and this is his or her sole and separate property. So we've got 2 methods: prenups that will work most of the time, but not all the time, and we've got irrevocable trusts that can change ownership prior to the marriage.
Awesome. Well, great. Yeah, and I know sometimes it's not an easy conversation to have, especially if you're looking at getting married. But definitely something that should happen, especially in our society when once this is set up, you can move on with it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny not even bringing this up, not even having families know that I do this kind of stuff. I can be doing a simple, plain vanilla, revocable living trust, and parents will say a condition of inheritance is that this can only go to Billy and Sally as their sole and separate property, and they have to have a prenup if they're going to get married. So they can give that advice to other people, but it's hard for us to say, hey, love of my life, let's do this journey together, and you make my heart sing, and let's sign this agreement that we have separate property. It's tough for a lot of people.
Right. Well, I would say that's a good point, though, because a lot of EVGers, our whole purpose, not our whole purpose, but one of our journeys is to create wealth for our families and pass it on to our families and create, a legacy. And, I know there's quite a few EVG members that have reached out to us that are, they're at that stage in their life where they're looking at estate planning and they have kids. And so that is a good thing to bring up to those individuals and those members, that when you're putting together these plans and you have children that are going to be getting married, this is a way to get beyond that awkward conversation and make it a requirement of them to be part of that estate plan.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a good point you bring up, because you talk about wanting to build wealth for our families, but sometimes through the process of life, that family changes.
Yeah.
And so it may want to be passed on differently. And divorce is inherently a negative thing, and we never want to see it happen, but you have to kind of hope for the best and plan for the worst just in case it does happen. And you talked about families, husbands, wives, spouses, they do different things financially. And for me, my wife and I, we've always had bank accounts, been joined together, everything's combined in our own name, and we never even really talked about it. That's just how we thought we'd always do it, and how we've done it ever since we got married. So that's just what we've done. And the other point I want to make, you talked about when people first get married, everybody's happy. You don't want to talk about these kind of things, but finances is one of those things that always can be very challenging for couples to work through, and can contribute to a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, the best time, another way to look at it, I guess, is you may want to actually talk about it at the beginning of your marriage when everything is going good, because it's going to be so much more challenging if you have to talk about it at the end when things aren't going quite as you planned.
Yeah,
Right.
or even go to your parents and have them say, "Hey, can you make me have this conversation?" Might be a way to do it. Just saying.
So we hope you guys don't have to deal with it, but we want to give you guys the tools to be prepared. So
Yeah,
That's it.
appreciate it. Thanks again. And,
Absolutely.
Yep. We'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.